Welcome everyone to today's Social System Mapping Tech Talk session for March 23rd, 2020. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, Tim Hansen, and Kara Martner. Kara has been experiencing what we're considering virus-related technical difficulties. Just her internet is really bad. And so we're not leaning on her the way we normally would for breakouts and recording and etc. So for those of you, I'm just going to repeat this quickly. This is a new format where on the second Monday of every month, we'll do an on-ramp session in which we share a map. So you can, if you're not familiar with it, social system maps, you can look at one and ask questions of the person who made it or is responsible for it in some way. Next, the next session, the upcoming on-ramp session is going to be Lisa Negstad is going to share the human systems dynamics social system map, and Glenda Ouyang, who's the founder of Human Systems Dynamics, is going to be with her. So, and she's going to talk some about how she's used her map. So we're excited about that. The third Monday, we have deep dive conversations that dig deeper into a topic, often topics that have come up on the Monday sessions, where the Monday is an intro and we don't have the time to go really deep. So we try to do that on the third Monday of every month. The next deep dive conversation, Jim Best is going to host the conversation, and we're going to actually talk about what it would be like, what we would need to have in order to be more of a community of practice around mapping. So it's a little bit about generating a little more shared learning and shared resources and stuff. And then on the fourth Monday, we have Tech Talk, which this time is about time tagging. So today, we're going to talk about time tagging. We're talking about why, when, how, what, and where, pretty much in that order. And then we'll have some questions and answers. Oh, so that's why I got confused. There's the agenda. So I just did the agenda review. We'll have an introduction check-in in a minute. We'll have a time tagging demo. We'll have questions and answers, wrap up and close. And normally we stick around for an extra half hour if people want to chat further. But this time we're not going to, because I have a client call that happens right after. So I'm going to try to wrap us up about 3 or 4 minutes early so that I can jump into that other call. So I apologize for that if anyone was looking forward to that. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And because, hi, Mariana. We're just getting started with a check-in, and I wanted to do a slightly different approach with our check-in. I was on a call last week and they did this, and I thought it was kind of cool. It doesn't require breakout rooms, and since Kara's tech is having difficulties, we thought, well, let's just try this time. So for a check-in, what we're going to do, and this was for a session on leading trauma-informed Zoom calls, which was kind of cool. So this is, and I'm really bad at framing things and explaining what we're doing, so I'm trying here. but part of the point of part of this exercise is to both start to be able to see, like, have a check-in for all of us where we can start to see what's going on with each of us or how we're thinking or what we're up to, but all together as a whole, as opposed to splitting up into small groups. But it's in writing. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a question. I'm going to ask you to answer the question in the chat, but don't hit enter until. So we'll have a few moments to respond to the question. Hold off on hitting enter until I say, okay, everybody hit enter. Then we'll all hit enter. So all of our answers will come up at once. And then we'll read the answers briefly. And then I'll ask another question and we'll do the same thing again. So we'll sort of all be reading each other. it will be a little more organized and with some spaces for pauses and reading. So I thought we'd try that today. Everybody ready? Okay, so the first is, as usual, name, pronoun, location. And I'm doing it myself, so you can. So has everybody got that in the thing, ready to hit enter? Okay.
No.
No? In the chat. So you won't see anybody else's, Drew. Just write your name and your location in the chat.
Okay, yeah, fine.
And as soon as I say hit enter, we'll all hit enter, and then we'll read each other's information. Ready? Go. Cool. And then let's all take a moment and write down a network that we are either mapping or thinking about mapping, and that we would be using time tags for. So what's the population your intentions today are aimed towards? You don't have to put your name because the chat has that.
Just the name of the network?
Yeah, and just a sentence about it. Don't hit enter until I say. Ready? Go. And then let's go back up and read those. Oh, cool, Ryan, you're going to map your company. After mapping.
We've done it once before. It's but it's been a while.
Cool. Cool. Mariana, cool. Fun or important. Okay. Another question, the next question, and again, don't hit enter until I say, is why, now I don't, doesn't need to be a big paragraph, but why, what's the impetus for mapping that network? What's the value that you and or the people in the network are hoping to get from mapping? Oops, I hit enter. Feel free to go ahead when you're ready to hit enter on this one. And let's pause and read. And then just going to do one more, which is, what has your attention today? Or right this moment? No, I wouldn't hit enter. Okay, go ahead and. Okay, so one of the things that I just wanted to sort of articulate nice is that so we do, so one of the things I was reflecting on as I was doing that trauma-informed call, or how to host trauma-informed Zoom calls, was how much of what most of you people are doing is about things like, is about both actions and relationships, and the calls that we host, that Tim and I and Kara host, are a lot about process and technology. And often the process and the technology, that's what you come for, and that's what you want from us. And that's very important. And it doesn't feel as touchy-feely so I start to feel like this tension between relationship building and just answering the needed technical questions so people can get on with their work. And so I just wanted us to think about for just a moment how the whole point of the work is about building relationships. And even if we're deep in the weeds of code, we're still building relationships so that we can rely on each other to help build these maps. And so part of the activity was to say, if you take a moment to go back and look through all the comments, think about what's different from your situation and other people's situation, and what's the same. And is there anybody in those comments, anyone here that you would benefit from reaching out to and connecting with in some way, either just to share some tips or to have a conversation or whatever. Okay. So I'm done with that part. And so now I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Can you all see my screen now?
Yep.
Yay. Okay. So first I'm going to show you what time tagging is. Okay. So here is a network. So time tagging is a way of noticing the differences in your network over time. So what does it look like in, say, for instance, 2016? What does it look like in 2017? What does it look like in 2018, et cetera? Funders, especially people who are foundations that are funding networks, love this when they see it, because if they're funding a network, they want to be able to, it's hard to measure outcomes in a network, and this is one way you can measure. If the point of a network is to build relationships, then this will show us that. In this particular instance, this is really not a network. This is an event. This foundation brings all these people together for this 3-day event, and they want to build the map. And so they use time tagging as sort of a rah, get on the map. Here's how we can measure our progress of getting you people on the map. So it's no deeper than that, but it does work. So in this instance, this is the current state of that network with, who's connected to who. So down here are the time tags. So this is before. If I click on before, now we can see that before the event, there were a lot fewer connections. And then on day 1, while they're going around saying, rah, get on the map, you can see a few lines showed up, but not many new ones. And they're all sort of in the same general neighborhood. And then on day 2, there's a couple more. On day 3, there's a few, this person did some connections, and then on day 4, they all went into the map. And in the meantime, they're of course connecting and meeting each other, and then something must have happened on day 4 that made everybody go and put their new connections into the map. So that's the basic, what we're looking at. And so what I'm going to do now is show you how to set that up in sumApp. I'm going to show you what that looks like. And then Tim's going to show you how to set that up in Kumu. So this is, if we just go into, okay, so this actually is the literal set of time tags that fed this. So day 1, day 2, day 4, those are time tag or period labels. And we just put them there. And then these are the actual dates that they covered. So this whole set here is what we're going to talk about. But I just wanted you to be able to see the relationship between the labels and the periods.
Say, I'm going to just say one thing since we're here. You
Mhm.
can go in and delete these and just keep dicing things however you want, and you're not going to lose anything. So you can change the dates and then go back and re-put the same dates in, and it's very generalized. So you won't lose anything if you want to change the time frames, and then just
Yep.
go, yeah.
And I'm going to do that in just a minute. Okay, so that's just showing so I'm going to shut that and shut that. This one, so this is a similar, we're looking at time frames. In this instance, this is me testing. So we don't have any public maps that we can share that have like a better sequence of time frames than the one I just showed you. But this is a test project that I started a while in September. And for that test project, I was doing a bunch of testing of the data outputs. So I would go in and make, pretend connections and then add a new day over and over, so I could be testing that all the data was coming out right. So we have a map that has that data on it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you right now what Tim just said, which is I'm going to go. I don't need all this fine grain testing, and a lot of time has passed. And if connections had been made in the meantime, they wouldn't be showing up because this last date is January 31st. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically start from scratch and redo this whole thing. And you can see that I can redo that. It will show up in the data, but you won't lose any of you will lose those old labels and those time tags. There's only one set of time tags that can be kept, but you don't lose the connections or any of the information that went along with them. Okay, so now I'm gonna just refresh because it's always good to refresh. So a couple things to note. The period starts will not, this selector will not go further back than when your project started. So if you're saying, why is that gray thing there and it won't let me, it's because the project didn't exist yet. So there can't be any data. If you have a really old project that was started before we initiated time tags, it won't go to before the time tags were initiated. So that's another place where you might be trying to go deep in the history. And like Ryan, it might be that one of your maps is that old that it was like November 2017. So maybe you're not that old, but just to note, that's the reason why you'll have this grayed out. So you usually want to start with the first date. And then in this instance, so I had all those fine grain days. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go to the middle of that period that I was working with, which was, I wrote it down. So I did a bunch of testing in that first week. And then, so I'm going to call that the first round of tests. And then I'm going to add another one, and it's going to automatically fill in the same date here. So it's not going to allow you to make an accidental gap where I missed a date or a month or anything like that. It's going to it's going to absolutely make sure that it catches every date. So it fills in that period start from the last period's ending time. And then I'm going to put in, I think I'm going to just go up until, for now, up until when I stopped. Let me just call that later tests. Oops. And then just to show you one other thing, I'm going to add, I'm going to put, so now I'm going to have this time frame, and I'm going to go up until tomorrow. Now, a thing to note, you could put, I could put today in here, or I could put yesterday in here, and not put another future date, in which case anything that happens after that, the last date in the sequence, won't show up in your time tags. So sometimes I will be testing and I'll be like, oh, it's not working. That thing is broken because a time, like a connection won't show up. Like, I just did it. I know it's there. It should be there. And then like I've done it enough times now. And then I go, oh yeah, wait a minute. And then I go look here and I'm like, oh yeah, that's because I cut the date off like 2 days ago. So of course it's not showing up. So so you want to kind of keep that in mind if you set up a map and then you say, okay, well, let's go to the end of this month. Or you might want to just go, you know, out 5 years. However you figure that out, just go back and check periodically that you're still tagging dates. You're not going to lose any of that information. It's just that it won't show up with a new tag. So I'm going to just call this last run then. Okay. So that's how we create the time frames and the labels. I'll pause here. Questions?
I'm going to make a comment.
Mhm.
When you create your time tags and then you go to your map and you refresh and you want to see the data in there, it won't show up because sumApp caches data for 7 hours. So if you want to have the data show up right away after you create these, you have to go to a connection. You have to go to your connection table, your file, the connection tab in sumApp, and create a connection, and then either just delete it. You just have to do something that refreshes the cache so that the data will show up right away. Otherwise, it won't show up for 7 hours. Does that
So,
make
but Tim, the data will be there. The map will be there. It's just whatever, like if you add a new time tag
Yeah.
without impacting the data in some way,
Yep.
that time tag won't show up. in
Right.
that.
So you just have to go impact the data if you want it to show up right away.
Okay, so this is this particular testing project. I just made those timeframes. And now I'm going to show you briefly what that looks like in the data because it's useful to know what your data looks like. So when you go to data management and download data, some of this stuff is irrelevant, but because I'm in a combined project, so you can ignore some of these options won't show up, but you'll have a member list CSV, you'll have a connections list CSV, and you'll have a JSON link with time tags. And right now I'm going to give this JSON link with time tags to Tim in the chat so that he can prep the map. So he can have it. Maybe Tim, wait to show them how to put that link in though. So don't put it in yet, you just have it. Okay, so downloading a member list CSV. So this is the members and the tags. So this is all the members. This is a list of all the members in the project. And as we can see, there's a person here who this person has done nothing in the project yet. And this person has done nothing. So they don't have any time tags. Everybody else, in pretend land, it was me doing it, but everybody else did something within the first round. And so it was like, okay, in the first time tag, in that first time period, they did something. So they said, okay, I'm on this map, I exist. And what we do with sumApp is because we keep the data and we just ask people to update the data, we just roll the time tags forward. There's no way to like make sure, like if it would be hard to expect them to go into every time frame and say, yes, I'm still here. Yes, I'm still here. Yes, I'm still here. So we just roll them forward in terms of them as elements. If you decide they're totally inactive, then you should probably take them out of the map. But once they're on the map, they're on. So we can see the sequence of when they joined the map by their tags, and then it will just roll forward. So that's the output for the elements. And then the output for the connections, I maybe didn't mention this, but be sure that you check that you want the time tag data set, not the non-time tag. For the connections, let me just do this. Okay, this is a little different than the element connections because there's an extra dimension going on. So let me back up and just say that with the elements, the only thing that we're tracking is when did they join the network? When did they first do something on the map? We're not tracking their changes to their survey over time. So if their title changed, you know, in the middle of a time frame, the only data we're outputting for the elements is the most recent data, because if my title changes or if I move to a different city, that's not a huge impact on the network. That's just about me. And so we just have the most recent. It's the connect, but in the connection questions, we're tracking not only when did a connection get made, but what kind of connection, what kind of the ranking connection, what kind of connection was it in this time frame, and then what kind of connection was it in this time frame, and then what kind of connection was it in this time frame. So we've got an extra dimension. There is both time and value, the value of the relationship that we're tracking. And that when we first launched the time tags, the way Kumu worked was we could not do conditional formatting, and I'm not going to go into all the technical what that means, but what happened was we could not make it so that I mean, we could output the data so that all the time tags were on one row, but that would mean that you couldn't show them properly in Kumu because it would only just take the last value as the decoration. So you couldn't decorate the changes in the time frames. So what that meant was we had to make every change in a connection have a, wait a second, why did that out? Every change in a connection had to be in a new row. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that by taking Adrienne, who is a fictitious person. So these are all her connections, and I'm going to sort her connections A to Z. So we can see here that she has had a connection with Annabelle since the very first time frame, and it continued through the second time frame, and it started out strong and it's still strong. She's always had strong relationships. Let's pick on somebody else who's maybe got some variation in her relationships. Oh, well, okay, so people haven't been moving so much, but what it would be is if I hardly knew you in the first round, it would be a 1, and then I went in the middle of the second round and gave it a 2, you would see each difference here. And we have to do that so that we can select each row separately in Kumu. I know I'm not articulating this very well, I apologize. That's what the data looks like. I'm just gonna shrink this down. I think I'm gonna shrink this down. And then, oh, I was just gonna go do one more thing, which is, so here we've got Lucille. I'm gonna say she knows. So I'm making some changes right now so that they should show up in this time frame. I think, and now I'm gonna be Paula and just do a couple more so we can see them. If we were testing, we would want to do that. Okay. So Tim, I think we're ready for you to go. So let's stop. So let's pause here before we go into what does this look like in Kumu. Oh, there's one more thing I should say, which is it is possible now using, Tim, what are those things called? Partial views. It's possible now using partial views to, if we put output the data, the connection data on a single row, you can now visualize it the way we want to, but it's more complicated and you'd have to be a more technically savvy to do it. And so we, at some point, will start doing the output that way, but you'll still want to, this is the easier way to do it. The reason I'm saying all this is because it messes up your stats, because now every relationship has 4 connections. And so you have to think hard about where you put your time tags and how you measure your stacks, because the relationships are now repeated in rows. Okay. Totally not doing well here. Tim, you can, I'm going to stop my sharing and you can share your screen.
Well, maybe we should ask people if they have any questions about what you've been saying.
Did I not do that? I meant to do
No.
that. I apologize. Thank you.
Yep.
Questions? Totally boggled by my confusingness. Jim's like, a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Can you see this?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So, I have the link from Camus, the JSON link here, and you have to get the one with time tags. So we get that one
You mean from sumApp?
from sumApp. Yep. So you're in sumApp. You get the JSON link. You have a choice between getting it without time tags and getting it with time tags. Time tags will add a lot of extra data. So if you have a big network and a lot of people making connections, this file will be very large. And Camus starts to get bogged down when you have too much data. But so here, and to put a link in Camus, so you start your map. They have this big green button, and you click it, click import, and you just go to link map to a remote JSON. And you just
Tim,
paste that in there.
can you give a rough feel for what too much data is with time tagging here?
Say, oh, we have one map, say, that has 1,200 members and maybe 12,000 connections. And that starts to slow things down considerably. It really starts to get bogged down. So things move really slowly. It kind of works, and you have to be patient, and you have to use the low quality method of rendering things. So you don't get a picture, you just get a square. That speeds it up quite a bit.
Is that with or without time tags?
So
yep, go ahead.
okay, so that in that particular map, if we were to add 2 times, so the part of the point of me yammering about the extra rows per connection is that so that each connection, each time frame multiplies the number of connections that you have in your data set by how many time frames. So if you've got 2 time frames, you're essentially doubling your number of connections. And if you've got 3, you're tripling your number of connections. So, and that's why we would like to get to this other way of outputting the data, because that would solve that problem, but it's just harder to visualize in Kumu. But that in testing, Jim, we've tested that big map with 2 time frames, and depending on the context, sometimes it times out and it won't go through, and sometimes it will load. But so 20,000 connections is however you know, like whatever multiple of, if you look at how many connections are, and is probably higher than you want to go.
Great.
And just to say to a little more clarity around why would you, so it might be a situation where you're in early days, it's small, and you want to measure the network, you know, every week or every day as you're doing the, you know, rah, get on the map sort of thing. But when your map is 3 years old, you're not going to want, you know, a whole, you know, 3 years worth of weeks. So you're going to start to chunk it down. So over time you're going to want to adjust your time frames, which is why we made it so that you can do that. So they're not carved in stone. And one last thing I forgot to say was, you can do this at any time. People will ask me, do I have to figure out my time tags before I start gathering data? And it's like, no, just gather your data. When you know what time frames you need, you can put them in there. If you need to change them, you can change them. The connections and the person data is all being gathered. So you don't have to figure it all out ahead of time. It can be changed. Okay, so Tim just loaded that, and go, sorry.
Tim, Ryan's got a question that piggybacks right on to what we were just asking in the chat.
No. Someone read it.
It says, does it change the lag to use a JSON file versus downloading and using fixed data?
Yeah, well, I think it only changes when you use a JSON. It's live. So when you first come into the map, there's that spinning dial that you have to sit and wait for. But no, I think it lags pretty hard either way. It probably, if you loaded the data, it would improve it by a little bit. But too much data for Camus is too much data. Yeah.
But along those lines, though, Ryan, there's a difference between just loading the browser and moving the data from sumApp into Kumu in the like, it can time out before it's even like in Kumu if you're using the JSON. And we were playing for a little while with outputting each time frame as a separate thing so that you could load like not live, fixed data in separate tranches. Like you could load them into different maps and slow, you know, like ways of breaking it up. We've been playing with ways of breaking it up, but yeah, you could avoid that getting stuck in the ether, not going anywhere, and then just have a slow load if you used fixed data if you really wanted to. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. So so here we are. I have the data in the map, and the easiest way to create a filter so that is just use Kumu's wizard. That's the easiest way to do that. And if you just go to more options, and
Tim, when you're saying filter, you also mean a time tag, right? It's just
filtering on time tags.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just go to add custom control. We'll start off filtering by elements. You can put it wherever you want, top, bottom, wherever it is. And then by the element. And so this is by tags. And the hardest part is always finding what you're looking for. And so right here, then you just save it. And then I'm going to go back to the advanced editor so we can see. Kumu then puts the little chunk of code in there for you. And then you can just filter on the first round, last round, later round.
I did it backward, yeah.
Yeah. And to point out, depending on, Kumu will put these in their alphabetical order, I think, and it might be that your labels are not alphabetical. So then these will not show up in a logical way that makes sense. You can get around that by labeling, by creating an option for each one. And I'll post the code in how to do that because it's pretty annoying to not have your buttons show up in the way that it makes sense. I'll do that in the Slack channel to show you how to do that.
Tim, there was also, you had a problem, and I don't remember if this got fixed from Kumu or if we blocked it or you just know to do a workaround, but there was a place where the numbers were getting interpreted wrong, or like if it was like you can't put dates in there in your labels. What was that? Do you remember?
Oh yeah, if you put like a date, like 3/25/20 as the actual label, the JavaScript that runs everything gets really confused by that. So don't use a straight numerical label for a date, or even January 20th or something like that. It will confuse everything. So put an I in front of it. Just do something to make it not be an actual date.
An interpretable date, whether
Yeah,
it's
an
a text
interpretable
or a
date.
number.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kumu will get confused by it. If you download the data in Excel will get confused by it. It will turn everything into an actual date.
Okay.
Um,
So just to point out, these are, in this tags, they're just when did the elements join the network, because he's made the filters based on element tags. So this way he just did it is not taking into account the changes in connection over time. So that's
Yep.
what, yeah, go ahead.
So you can easily do that by either using the wizard by selecting filter on connections, or you can just go into your little bit of code here and just change it to connection. And then save it. And now these are filtering on connections. And you get a much different profile when you do that.
Tim, I have a question. I got mixed up there because I thought you were saying, Christine, that the time tagging doesn't capture changes in the profile. So if you targeted on element, there would be no changes.
Yeah, in this particular data set, there aren't any because I loaded it's a fixed population. But if your population is growing over time,
Oh,
then the time tags would have who was there in the
Okay.
beginning, who was
I'm
there
sorry.
in the middle, who was there in the end. But then Tim was gonna, but then the question here, right, is what if you want both? What if you want to look at them together?
Yeah, if you want to look at them together, you just go here and you put in an asterisk. That's a wildcard that will select on both elements and connections.
Or it will select on anything that has a tag field.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, elements and connections. Yeah,
Mhm.
nothing else would.
Yeah. And then, and this then will then select for both. It's the most restrictive and maybe the most informative. Well, it just depends on what you want to show, I guess. So that's the easy way to create a time tag. I'm going to make out one point. If you have a bunch of views, right, you probably only want to show the time tags on a view instead of all your views, because so on your views where you don't have time tags, where you don't want to show them, I would remove them because they add a lot of extra data and they will slow the view down. So if we go here and we go to the filter and we go to the rocket here, this says just include these things on the map. You would want to go to, on all the views where you don't want to show the time tag, you go to, again, we got to find tags. And the tag is, and you find your last tag, because the last tag will have everybody. And you click that and you save it. And now you'll only have the connections for that last time frame. This way you removed all the extra connection data, which will only bog the view down, will only confuse everything. Does that make sense? I hope. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm
so
gonna,
that's kind of an important thing to do.
yeah, I'm going to say one more thing, which is, so what Tim's getting at here is, and what I was trying to get at when I'm saying that every connection, each time frame makes a whole new row of connection. So what that means is if we've got all the time tags selected, if we've got all the links that we could, each line there, some of them are, there are 3 of them piled on top of each other because there's a line for every row in this spreadsheet. So, you can only see the one, but they're piled on top of each other. So first of all, it just adds more data. In a map this size, it doesn't matter at all, but in a bigger map, it's going to start to bog it down. And the other piece of that is that then, and so that's why I'm saying it will mess up your stats. If you run your stats with potentially as many actual connections piled on top of each other as you have time frames, it's going to totally skew your metrics if you're looking at metrics. So that's another reason to take them out and don't put your metrics in the same view that you put your time tags, because that would just be problematic. Tim does run, do you have a view that we could show him that has those counts that show, let's not go there.
Can you show the code on this one?
What do you mean?
Just show
Save
advanced editor.
and go to the advanced.
Go to the advanced editor?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it shows up right here. Include.
Can I ask a sideways question really quickly?
Mm-hmm.
So if you go back to the basic editor, that statement also includes, in addition to what's checked above, it's not you are going to see in addition elements. You're saying this is a filter statement in addition to what's being offered from above, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, this is just like if you had a filter. It's like if
Yeah.
you click this right here.
Right.
You're only going to show the ones with the latest time tags. Yeah.
I've just been getting balled up in these include statements. You start with nothing, you click those boxes up above, that's what you're going to view, and then everything else is a filter on
Yep.
top of it, taking
Right.
away from.
Yep.
Other questions? Is anybody like totally confused? by my yammering.
The only thing I'm confused about is the stats bit. So am I right in thinking that if you take out in each round, if you take out the previous rounds, then that won't mess up the stats, or like what
Say,
you're
can you,
just showing?
I missed your first sentence. The thing you're confused about is the what? I'm not,
The stats, how it messes up the stats.
okay. So if, so let's just, so you can kind of, oh, Tim, can you stop sharing and I'm gonna share that version for a second? Let me just, okay. I think can you see my screen? Okay.
Yeah.
So if this is there's actually, so you can kind of see how, because we have not decorated these lines. If we had decorated, if we'd taken the time to decorate these lines, it might be a little easier to see. But this one is just a little teeny bit fainter than this one. Can you see that? That's because this one is maybe only one time frame, and this one is actually 3 connections. So it's 3 times, there's 3 connections in the data between Hazel and Junior. And so if your stats, if you were looking for, you know, how long have they been in the network plus how well connected are they in the network, then that might be relevant. But to say that this relationship is a value, has like a triple value, and this relationship only has a single value because one was older than another, you just need to know that that's what you're gonna get. So this person, the person who's been in the network the longest, is going to look to have the highest centrality, and they may, but it's going to be totally exaggerated by when other people said they were connected to them and when they said they were connected to others. Is that clear, Ryan?
Yeah.
Maybe Ryan, you're a wonky guy. Maybe you could say it better than me, since it looks like you understand.
That's clear, but how do you get around that is what I wanted to know.
Oh,
kind of more.
by filtering those extra ones. It's by just having the current state. So
If you refresh the map, I put a little SNA dashboard up there that maybe will show off the numbers and demonstrate what you're doing.
Okay. So what Tim was just showing in the code a minute ago was how to filter out the earlier time frame so that you just have the last time frame, which is basically the current state of the map. So what he just did was he put those things up there. So for these 10 connections right now, because we haven't selected anything. So we're in the current state, there's 90 connections between these 10 people. But if in the first round, there were only 8 elements and there were 18 connections. In the second round, if we go to it's like, there's 9 people, there's 9.
So I'm filtering right now to remember, if you go into the basic editor, we're filtering out all the extra time tags.
Right here,
No, the basic, yeah, right.
the advanced editor.
Yeah.
So your filter, I thought this was,
So let me remove that and you'll have to refresh. And then all of the time tags will be back in there now.
okay. I see. Tell me when.
I suppose, yeah, okay. So if you refresh, well, you'll now be able to show that.
Okay, so for 10 elements, right now there's 90 connections. In the first round, there were 18 connections. That's not going to tell us it though, because it doesn't tell us which ones are piled on top of each other. We can't see that. We could only, I think, Rebecca, is it clear? Do you get it now?
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
okay. Other questions? Drew?
Yes.
Question? You got this?
Sorry, but we're actually right in the middle of trying to time tag a couple of projects at the moment using methods similar to this one, not identical. So I'll send them both to you just for comment.
Cool.
Too complicated to go in here, but time tagging is really, really important.
Oh, all right. In the middle of a sentence, Drew.
I'm sorry.
You totally froze up and went black for a minute. That's okay. Oh, I've got to go. Yes,
Okay.
I have another meeting. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your patience.
Thanks.
And yeah.
Thanks for this work and thanks for the explanation.
Yeah,
Okay.
hey, I'll put in the Slack channel how to write a filter that puts things in the alphabetical order that you want, as opposed to what comes straight out of Camus.
Okay. And
Example
since
of
I
that.
have to go, I'm gonna shut you all out. Sorry. I'd let you chat, but I didn't set it up.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Thank you.